Hello and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating. Whether you're looking at human behavior through a strictly psychological lens or a more spiritual one, there's no denying that our darkest internal struggles, things like feelings of inadequacy, envy, and fear, are totally universal. We all feel them. So today, we're going to unpack a highly specific, really intriguing framework that's designed to essentially conquer those exact ailments of the human mind. Let's get right into it. Our source material for this deep dive is a book called Infinite Love by Ryuho Okawa. And what's really cool about how this text is structured is that it's not just some abstract philosophy. It essentially serves as a spiritual diagnostic manual for human suffering. It literally categorizes our core emotional struggles and then prescribes very specific faith-based mechanisms for overcoming them. We're going to impartially map out exactly how this text constructs its arguments to offer a pathway out of all that mental anguish. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The human struggle explained. 2. Conquering inferiority through faith. 3. Escaping the jealousy trap. 4. Healing fear, poverty, and illness. And finally, 5. The power of infinite love. All right, starting off with Section 1, the human struggle explained. So let's kick things off with a question I think we can all relate to. Why do we, as humans, seem so hardwired to gravitate toward negative emotional states, even when we're trying our absolute hardest to just be happy? Well, according to this framework, the human mind is primarily trapped by 3 core elements. First up is crippling inferiority, which basically comes from this endless cycle of comparing our own worldly qualifications to everyone else's. Second is destructive jealousy, that burning resentment when you see someone else succeed. And third is paralyzing fear and poverty, which stems from feeling totally disconnected and helpless in the physical world. The author diagnoses these not just as bad moods, but as actual spiritual sicknesses, and as we'll see, prescribes a very specific cure for each one. Moving right along to Section 2, Conquering Inferiority Through Faith. The author posits this really fascinating idea. In the grand scheme of the spiritual world, your worldly qualifications, they simply do not matter. To anchor this, the text actually draws on the author's own very personal experiences with language barriers and feelings of inferiority during a stay in America. It's a modern, highly relatable anecdote. But then, the text masterfully contrasts that personal story with a brilliant historical parallel from early Christianity, specifically looking at the psychological profiles of the apostles Paul and Peter. This comparison perfectly illustrates the text's core point. On one side, you have Paul. The guy had literally every societal advantage you could want back then. He was highly educated, fluent in 3 languages, and held the immense privilege of Roman citizenship. Yet he was tortured by a deep inferiority complex and massive guilt over his past persecution of Christians. Now flip the script to Peter. Peter was an uneducated fisherman. He only spoke Aramaic, which severely limited his ability to preach to wider audiences, and he suffered a massive inferiority complex precisely because he lacked that worldly knowledge Paul had. They were complete opposites in status, but completely united by the exact same crippling human emotion. The crucial takeaway the author makes here is that intense, unwavering belief in a higher power is the true mechanism to conquer these deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. When you measure yourself against the divine, the text argues, both Paul's impressive resume and Peter's extreme lack of one are equally meaningless. Faith acts as the ultimate equalizer. It fundamentally erases the sting of an inferiority complex because you're shifting the baseline of your self-worth entirely away from human comparison. It's a total paradigm shift. Let's dive into Section 3, Escaping the Jealousy Trap. Now we have to tackle an even darker, much more volatile emotion described in the text, the consuming fire of jealousy. And to explain just how dangerous this emotion is, the text zooms way out, away from human history and straight into deep cosmic lore. It maps out the mythological fall of Lucifer as the ultimate cautionary tale. We're talking over 100 million years ago, involving a powerful angelic being in the 9th dimension. The text explains that this being became intensely jealous of its own ideal. Consumed by this fiery envy, the angel literally plummets to the lowest realms and becomes Lucifer. It's presented as the absolute quintessential example of jealousy completely destroying the self. But why exactly does jealousy destroy us? Well, the author explains what we could call the spiritual physics of this emotion. Think about it. When you burn with jealousy towards someone who represents everything you want to be, your ideal, you're actually generating a negative psychological and spiritual force. By putting them down in your mind, the text argues, you are subconsciously rejecting the very traits you desire. that creates a vector that pushes you further and further away from ever achieving that ideal yourself. It is quite literally a self-defeating trap. So how do we break free from that? The text introduces a highly specific conceptual cure called the heart of blessing. It's defined as the ultimate spiritual antidote to the poison of jealousy, but it's not easy. It requires the ability to sincerely, genuinely celebrate the success and happiness of others. The framework argues that by blessing the person who embodies your ideal, you realign your own mental energy with that ideal. It completely neutralizes the destructive, repelling force of jealousy.
All right, Section 4, Healing Fear, Poverty, and Illness.
Moving into a much brighter space, how does this belief system address the paralyzing, tangible grips of fear, poverty, and physical illness in our everyday lives? The text introduces a really powerful visual metaphor to combat fear. Believers are encouraged to establish what's called a pillar of faith. Imagine a massive vertical column of pure belief that pierces straight through the dense earthly realm right up into the heavenly world. According to the source material, constructing this internal pillar acts as an absolute shield. It protects your mind from all the random, chaotic fears that constantly swirl around in human society. Now, when it comes to physical illness, the text details a very specific prayer and practice called El Cantare healing. The absolute non-negotiable prerequisite here is the premise of faith from both the healer and the recipient. And what's super fascinating about the mechanics of this framework is its view on distance. While the healing can be performed directly in front of a sick individual, the text explicitly states that remote distance healing works with the exact same efficacy. Why? Because within the logic of this system, spiritual light and intention are completely unbound by earthly physical distance. You can transmit it across the globe instantly.
Finally, we've arrived at Section 5, The Power of Infinite Love.
Let's see how all these diagnostic concepts and cures build toward the grand, overarching theme of the text. The author concludes that true liberation only happens when a person fully taps into this concept of infinite love from God or Buddha. Accessing this state promises to eradicate those self-punishing loops of inferiority. It completely replaces the isolating fires of jealousy with a mindset of mutual forgiveness and abundance. And most importantly, it awakens the realization that every single human is fundamentally a child of the divine. The argument is that without this realization, we're just blindly stumbling through trial and error using our own extremely limited power, which of course ultimately leads to suffering. I want to highlight this really powerful quote directly translated from the text. It reads, "If you truly believe, the wonderful nature of the Buddha will manifest from within you. The glory of the Buddha will surely liberate you from poverty." This just synthesizes the core argument of the entire framework perfectly, right? It's the profound idea that genuine, unshakable faith doesn't just comfort you. It actually fundamentally rewrites your reality from the inside out, manifesting both spiritual and physical abundance. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've journeyed through a highly structured spiritual diagnostic manual today, from the crippling traps of inferiority and jealousy to the liberating concepts of the heart of blessing and infinite love. So I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect upon. When you're faced with your own internal struggles, will you allow the self-defeating fires of jealousy and comparison to dictate your reality? Or will you choose to build your own internal pillar of faith? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I hope this framework has offered you a fascinating new perspective on conquering the human mind.